Hello, how are you? If you're interested in projections for 2025 and you're interested in knowing what's going to happen in the IT industry for this year, then please keep watching. Hello and welcome. Happy New Year to all my Cloud State of Play audience. My name is Richard Simon. I am Cloud Therapist. This is the January 2025 episode of Cloud State of Play. In this episode, we are going to be creating some projections, I guess. We're going to be looking at the year ahead. And if you're a long-term sort of audience member of the Cloud State of Play, you probably kind of already appreciate that we like to do more projections rather than predictions. Unlike some of the other IT pundits, we like to stick to projections. And I think I've explained this before, but I will explain it again in the description of the video. So do have a look at that. Yeah, so I think we'll try and focus on that for this particular episode and see what we can actually discuss. We've got lots to go through, so we'll try and get that done. Now, as always, I have the pleasure to welcome back for the first time, I think, for 2025, the effervescent Paul Bevan. Paul is the head of infrastructure research at Bloor Research.
And our first projection is that you're never going to run out of particular adjectives to describe me with.
Absolutely. I have Copilot and ChatGPT to help me out with those for the rest of the year. So no problems at all. So Paul, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to the new year and all the wonderful sort of swings of roundabouts there's going to be in this coming year. So
yeah,
we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I can't wait. So, I mean, we've already had some, and we're going to discuss a few, I guess, of those in this particular episode. So, yeah, looking forward to doing that with you. Yeah, so I think there was actually something I picked up on one of the reports that we're going to be discussing today. But they had like a summary at the beginning of the report, which I thought was quite interesting. So, from a report by Market.us. And it said the global cloud computing market size is expected to be worth around $2.9 billion by 2033. So that's up from, oh, sorry, no, that's not actually, that's 2.9 trillion, I think. Sorry. I forgot the rest of the numbers and the digits on that one. 2.9 trillion. Okay, 2.9 trillion. Yeah, 2.9 trillion. There we go. 2.9 trillion. So 2.9 trillion dollars by 2033. So that's up from 629 billion in 2023. So that's a sort of a 10-year sort of thing. So the compound annual growth for that is 16.8%. So that's during their forecast, I think, from this year up to 2033. So that's kind of just setting the scene by just kind of spitting out some of those interesting numbers. Now, we have a number of kind of loosely sort of coupled categories. Some of the categories Paul has picked up on in terms of the projections, and I've kind of suggested as well. And we're going to go through all of those in sequence. We've got everything from kind of DevOps to obviously GenAI to data and various other ones along the way as well. But let's, Paul, shall we start with the DevOps and platform engineering one?
Yeah.
Shall we go there first? Okay. What was kind of your, just kind of reflecting back a little bit, and we won't kind of look at our projections maybe from last year, because I think that's going to take a little bit longer, unfortunately. So I might do a summary of that actually in the description of the video and kind of see where we got things right and where we maybe got things wrong. You never know. But in terms of kind of looking back at what's happened in 24, now projecting some of that into 2025, what's your take on DevOps and platform engineering?
Well, I think I've always seen, and maybe you disagree slightly, platform engineering has always appeared to me to be a response to the fact that the sort of cultural shift that was supposed to be happening with DevOps hasn't really happened. And I've said in the past, in fact, I've written about on the Blur website, dev with capital DEV and ops and a very small op.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
And to me, platform engineering always looked like a response to how do we make that easier. And I'll wash my mouth out with soap afterwards. But I was at VMware Explore in Barcelona, and there was a wonderful presentation on. In fact, it was Tanzu, but actually it was about platform engineering. That
Right.
and effectively Tanzu is platform engineering for VMware customers. But the actual presentation between a developer and effectively like a guy who was in operations was it was hilarious. It was stand up. It was great, but
Right.
it actually highlighted the challenges you see, and they're not going to go away. DevOps developers are being pushed to develop more and more services, business services, as fast as possible. The world keeps changing. It's not, a static environment at all. It's so unlike, what development used to be like. And with deference to the developers themselves, they're in a sort of, it's almost like a hamster wheel. It's how quickly can we keep, making changes and getting them out, and the CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah.
And therefore, for me, I think, this year, platform engineering is going to become one of the ways in which you can bridge that divide by having proper platforms, and actually just follow, and so I think, platform engineering will grow. I think it will become a little corporate, if you like. It'll be interesting to see what your sense is on that. But the pressure to develop more and more business services, in a cloud type environment, that's not going to go away. And that report that says cloud's going to grow to how many trillion by 2030 or when in 10 years.
Nearly $3 trillion.
That's just so devs, developers are going to be in the firing line, for right through this period, and therefore giving them any sort of way that automates and standardizes what they, effectively they want to develop code and pass it on to somebody else, and this idea of that sort of shift left and everybody cooperate nicely, sitting around the table, I think is, hogwash, really, to be honest. And therefore platform engineering is the way out. So I see a big future for platform engineering in the coming years. Interesting to get your view on that.
Yeah. So, well, the first response was that the guy at that VM World event, it wasn't a guy called Gotham Palapa, was it?
No.
Oh,
no.
Okay, good. All right.
It was he had a wonderful. I mean, there was a guy who's almost product manager for their Oren somebody, and then what was the other guy? He was a developer, but he was. So he came on, but he was a comedian. I mean, it's the only way to describe him. He was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. And he was doing the classic, I just need this. Just give me that. I just don't want that. If you do that, you give me the credentials, I'll do it, do it. And so the platform, effectively the guy running Tanzu was going, oh, well, no, we've already done that. We've automated that. Oh, that's great. Now, but I still need this, but. And he went all the way through to the end. He was going, oh, pretty shit. That was pretty cool, and you could sort of see the contention that was really cleverly done. I mean, you might not like VMware, but the whole thing was put together really well to show the sort of questions that developers ask around credentialing, around, just giving them the wherewithal to develop without having to think about all the other things, and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. Oh, no, we've done it for you. And it kept, that was the sort of story. We've done it for you. And of course, there was a level of skepticism from the developer until he got to the point he went, okay, got that. Now it was well staged, and we can have all the debates and there'd be great to get somebody on one of your channels to talk
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I
genuinely think platform engineering, if it's done properly and sensitively, then could well be what DevOps should have been in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned Gautam Palapa because he's one of the guys from VMware that actually joined me early last year for the platform engineering versus the world video that I did. So I'll drop a link in the description for that. Really good one. I got a whole bunch of guys who are kind of platform engineering advocates.
I'll dig out they actually recorded the
cool.
So I'll nice. Send it across because it's they recorded it from another show, I think. So it wasn't quite what I saw, but very close to what I saw.
Right. So I mean, just in response to kind of what you're saying, I think it's really came to a head in terms of sort of the the issues that seemingly, well, I'd not been aware of them until sort of about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, that DevOps, organizations have been struggling with DevOps. I thought that those kind of who went to DevOps, kind of went to DevOps and successfully made that move. But clearly that's not been the case, so much so that they've actually had to kind of come back in and introduce this sort of, platform engineering concept to at least kind of clearly define roles and standards and things like that within that sort of corporate environment. And whereas maybe some people in that space have been doing it for a long time will probably say, well, PE has always been there, platform engineering has always been there, we just didn't call it that, now it's kind of got a name. That's fair enough, but I think now it's kind of formalized. There's a lot more of that sort of standardization that's coming in. And one of the things that I really always pick up on when people talk about it is kind of conformity and standardization of tooling and platforms and workflows and so on.
Levels of automation.
Absolutely. So and like I said, I also picked up, and again try and include some of these in the description of the video, so do look for that. Is there was a number of articles that went everything from DevOps is not working to what did we get wrong with DevOps, and all the way to actually one that actually finally said DevOps is dead. DevOps has died, DevOps has failed, and now we need to kind of look at platform engineering as a sort of a replacement. So my 2 points in this space, and I guess they're kind of maybe a little bit sort of related, is one was kind of the more erosion of the development space in terms of jobs. So I think easily by the end of the year, we're going to see the junior developer role being seriously threatened by automation. I think in the DevOps and platform engineering space. So that's mainly because of code gen, because of generative AI sort of coming in doing the code gen. We've seen some false starts last year of that. So Devin was one of the sort of it was, I think, touted as the first GenAI sort of agent or developer in that space. But we've seen other, so that didn't kind of really work out. There was a lot of kind of fudging of how that was working. Other people sort of pushed back on that, quite rightly, on on places like YouTube and so on. And I think that's still in beta or something. I don't know what it said. It's still in a non-release state as far as Devin is concerned. But then the other one that came out, which I think seems to be more successful, is the SWE agent or SWE agent. So that's the software engineering agent. I think that project is on GitHub. Again, we'll try and provide some details on that. But that group seems to be more successful at kind of doing that sort of code gen type of thing. So a real sort of junior developer sort of role, being replaced by agentic AI. And we've seen, again, responses to the OpenAI's O1 model and OpenAI's O3 model being very good at that. And so much so to the point where some of the YouTubers who are kind of in that space and have been looking at this for a long time have actually had to kind of begrudgingly eat their words. And these models are very good at code generation, and they actually go through iterative, cycles of the code as you write code, and you ask them to improve on the code, and so on. So these are not even not like the SWE, agent, the SWE agent, in terms of their dedication. These are the general, sort of general purpose models like ChatGPT. But nevertheless, they've been very good at that capability, that code gen sort of capability. So I think quite bullish about my projection for the year is that we will see a very much a proper version of that being available, and actually see enterprises seriously start looking at it to adopt it for this year. I don't think it's going to necessarily replace people in that way, but it'll still be something that can be used in that space. Maybe that's kind of the next couple of years beyond 25.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with you. I don't think it'll replace people completely, but what I think it will do is increase productivity.
Yeah. I mean, and we're already seeing that with things like GitHub Copilot and so on. There's that kind of augmentation and so on happening.
You're augmenting and enabling one person to do the job that two had to do before. And there's so much growth potentially in the market that in the short, and we've seen this plenty of times in the past. People say, "Oh, jobs are going to go," and actually, the new opportunities that come out of the enhanced productivity means that, okay, jobs change slightly, and that's maybe a bit of a challenge. But I think that's a much longer conversation. So I agree with you. I think.
Okay. All right. So I think those are kind of the best ones that we can do for DevOps and platform engineering, and I think we'll probably just see those kind of merging into sort of into the kind of the same approach. Okay, so let's move on to the next category, which was generative AI. So we've got a kind of a broader view of this. Now, you want to kind of come in on DeepSeek, I think, a little bit, and have your comments on that.
Well, it was. I mean, it's interesting, and then DeepSeek sort of hit like a nuclear bomb.
Ton of bricks, yeah.
Quite apart from what it did to stocks for a couple of days before they got themselves back together.
Recovered, yeah.
But one of the sort of, if you like, my projections is that for various reasons, which may come up later, I'll discuss them as we go along, is that we actually need to be, or we will have to be, much more cognizant of the resources that we're using, whether it's in software development or hardware or wherever, going up, because GenAI, I've said it before, will we get answers to global warming before GenAI burns up the planet? I mean, it's that sort of a race. And DeepSeek, what was interesting from DeepSeek was, if it turns out that everything that's been said about it was true, they've effectively found a more economical way, and both in terms of use of resources, because they used older chips, not the newest AI chips from NVIDIA, and they obviously different ways of training the model to make it a much more effective process that didn't use as many resources.
Yeah,
I think from a sustainability point of view, we're going to see a lot more. I think it was a wake-up call. If what they said they've achieved, they have achieved by the methods that they're saying. And I think you and I have talked a little bit about, well, let's wait for the more detailed sort of look at how they did this. But if it's true the way they've done it with lower power GPUs and more effective training models, that's part of a projection I see of any software development. And you go back to the DevOps piece as well. Any software development is going to have to stop thinking I've got ultimate, cloud sort of made them think, hey, I don't need to worry about resource constraints. Well, I'm afraid the answer is yes, you do. So I think the projection is that, being resource efficient in a development environment, and GenAI will push that, is going to be very, very important in 2025.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I mean, a lot to say around that. So I'll try and kind of make it as brief as possible. So in terms of the investigation, I think Hugging Face was looking into kind of the claims of DeepSeek. The use, I think, it's kind of relied on distillation techniques and kind of stood on the shoulders of giants, if you like, because it's actually used previous models to kind of get to where it has. And again, we won't have time to kind of go into the details of that, but it's certainly, yes, awakened that sort of Gen AI on the cheap kind of thing. Can we do Gen AI a little bit cheaper than what we're doing, with kind of just throwing all these resources, GPUs and whatever at it? There was a concern around this database, a security breach of its database. So again, I think that's being investigated, and it's already been beaten by a model called Tulu 3 from AI2 as well. So there's actually cheaper models coming out, and again, obviously, we have to kind of investigate those claims of those models as well. But a couple of, I think, US ones have actually kind of beaten DeepSeek at its own game, which is quite interesting.
Which is great, because I think it's the sort of wake up call that the sector needed to say, we can't just go on throwing resources at this. We've got to find a better way of doing it, simply because it gets too expensive. Never mind the sustainability issues; it just gets too expensive. So.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, the stocks have recovered and so on. And I think I did read the article about Hugging Face doing the investigation.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I think there will be either a sort of a broader or general sort of unofficial consensus, I think, to kind of maintain project costs down. We might actually even see a very high level standard, kind of coming in to maybe do that. Some sort of a official or unofficial sort of criteria or tests are going to come from for doing AI model economics, if you like, something like that, or aiml as I want to call it. Something like that, I think would be useful.
Yeah, I think the whole business model needs looking at. I mean, how do you monetize this? How do you control the environment? All those sort of things need to be sorted out. So maybe 2025 is the year. That's why I say I think we should say a big thank you to DeepSeek, because it's made people sit up and go, oh my goodness me, there's more than one way of doing it. And actually, at the moment, we've got a bit of a runaway train in terms of cost and resource. This could be an interesting way forward.
Yeah, and I think Hugging Face has kind of been looking at sort of doing that on the open source models. There is benchmarks around. This one called GLUE, General Language Understanding Evaluation benchmark, which is kind of looks at sort of all these models. And I don't know exactly whether it's just performance benchmarking or actually kind of as I said, that sort of economics benchmarking as well. But that's an interesting kind of thing. Now, as I said, I think based on the trends that we've kind of seen in 24 and OpenAI releasing the O3 model, which has met some of the ARC AGI benchmark requirements, that's for achieving AGI level capability. So that was actually announced by OpenAI on their 12 days of Christmas last year. I think it was on the 12th day, they announced the O3 model. And I think based on that, we'll probably see, my projection is that we will probably see some kind of AGI capability being met, at least the benchmarks for AGI, things like ARC AGI, benchmarks actually being met by the end of the year, maybe even sooner. I have no idea what kind of, never know with OpenAI, but I think we'll probably do that by the end of the year, because O3 did meet some of the ARC AGI benchmark requirements, not all of them, and that was clarified by the guys from ARC AGI. But I think if that's the case with O3, goodness knows what they're working on now. I think we'll probably see that with the next iteration by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think pretty broadly I agree with where you're headed. I mean, obviously, from a projections point of view, at some point, it will run into the realities that we've talked about around data, and the quality of data prompting, but also concerns out in the marketplace around hallucinations and bias and all those sort of things. So from a projections point of view, on one hand, I think the technology will go on getting more and more powerful. I don't subscribe to the sort of it's going to be more intelligent than humans approach, but because AGI was some people take AGI as that, and it's not. It's it's
I think that's ASI. That's the super intelligence.
I mean, and that's very out. But people get so I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to bring the population along that doesn't scare the living daylights out of them. And I think the danger from a projection point of view is that you get governments too involved in what's going on and slow the thing down. So, but from a pure technology point of view, I tend to agree exactly with where you're going.
Yeah, there was a quote from the ARC Prize guys, so that's the guys who actually do the ARC AGI benchmark, and they said O3's improvement, this is a quote, O3's improvement over the GPT series proves that architecture is everything. You couldn't throw more compute at GPT-4 and get these results. Simply scaling up the things we were doing from 2019 to 2023, take the same architecture, train a bigger version on more data, is not enough. Okay. Further progress is about new ideas. And I do agree with that. It's not about just scaling more of the same, because the intelligence level is not going up. You have to think of new architecture techniques and new, just generally techniques, in order to make your model more clever than it is at the moment. We can't just scale with what we've learned. We can't just scale what we have and say, well, we'll just make the current one bigger, faster, and so on. That's not enough. The intelligence has to improve.
It'll get dumber quicker, I think, that happens. We talk about atrophying of artificial intelligence, because it will then, fall back to, well, here's what I decided before. I'm now deciding faster that this is what I decided before, and it's and so we'll lose the ability, as you say, to get smarter. So it's
that's the. I mean, and I, like I said, I do agree with that. I think there's definitely a truth in that, because the models have to get more clever. Okay, so it's the last point in this section on GenAI was around agentic AI. So Newstack predicts that AI agents may be doomed to fail in 2025, and it's kind of lists out a whole number of reasons. So it says current AI models lack true autonomy and have limited reasoning. Agent integration issues is just generally agent integration issues with everything that kind of exists at the moment. Data is still siloed, so this will kind of hinder AI agent performance. And I mean, and also I would say I'd add an extra point to that, to say a lot of the data is protected and is secured, so agents can't necessarily get to that. They can only get to what's kind of publicly available. And then the other thing is they're saying the danger in 2025, the danger between hype and reality of agentic systems.
I mean, particularly if you're dealing with the general public. We've talked in the past about how important getting the prompts are, getting those right. The average person dealing with an agent, an AI agent, is still going to talk the way we talk today. And we've only got anecdotal evidence from fairly dumb agents at the moment, but I mean, they unless you are very specific, Trying to get them to give you the answer is really, and it may be that they haven't got access to the data, but they simply don't understand the question that you've asked them. And so I think there's this whole idea about prompt engineering. It's almost as if we're going to have to train a much broader swathe of the population to understand how to interact. And it sort of comes back to basic communication. As humans, we hear something and we make assessments from what we heard without going, I don't really, quite often we go, I don't understand, but you can't do that with agents. So I think, I think there's been an awful lot of hype around agentic AI. There's a lot more work that needs to be done on that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like I said, we may see it on some rudimentary kind of capability. And this, the agentic AI or the AI agent landscape is huge already. There's actually if you're familiar with the CNCF landscape of projects, there's actually a similar chart now, an eye chart, as I would call it. And I actually used it in my presentation this week, in my keynote this week, at the Cloud and 5G Live. I'll try and drop a link on that as well. But I actually used it because there's a similar, chart landscape available for agentic AI. So the so I don't think we're going to get it to the level by this year, maybe, where we're going to say yes, and kind of my travel AI agent, and you say to, well, book me a holiday to North Africa, and it books you Libya instead of Morocco or something. It's kind of lands you in a war zone instead of the sunny beaches of Morocco or something. So I don't think it's going to be to that level, but we might see it on a smaller level, like booking maybe a restaurant, or handling your diary for you with certain rules that you kind of apply, like no appointments between or no appointments before 9:30 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually an advert going around at the moment for one of the mobile phones. I can't remember whether it was Samsung or one of those, where they're asking, it's AI powered, and they're basically saying, let's go out for dinner. Oh, well, I need somewhere that's dog friendly, that does this, that does that, has outdoor, and wow, the AI smartphone comes up with the exact place that you can go and do, and you think, who's got the time to actually work out how to do that? And I think that's part of the problem, is that it looks very flashy, but getting humans to talk in that way is going to be an interesting challenge.
Yeah, and I remember Google doing a demo of, I can't remember what it was, but it booked a table for you, and this was before the whole AI, sort of generative AI sort of thing kicked off. And I think you're probably looking at the Samsung one, because they introduced their latest phone with Gemini, the Google Gemini built in.
It is Samsung,
which is more than that we can say for Apple's intelligence. That's kind of seemed to have crashed and burned. Anyway, so I think that's kind of the what I see in that space. Now, I've actually covered agentic AI in the inaugural episode of AI State of Play. So that was done with a guy from AWS called Eduardo Audax. I'll drop the link in the description. I might try and get it on the screen here somewhere as well for you to click on. That's the episode of AI State of Play, and we talked about agentic AI on that as one of the topics. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Okay, Paul, so just in interest of time, let's move on to the next one, which is observability. Now, I'm probably just going to talk about one thing here, which is OTel, or open telemetry, and seeing more conformity to these kind of open standards from the more proprietary players, the Dynatraces and whatevers of the world. Now, I know that they've already mentioned those. Datadog mentions it, and Dynatraces mentioned it, and to a degree, I think they kind of, support that. But obviously, they have all these players have their own proprietary engines for how they do observability, clearly. But I think things like open telemetry is going to kind of level the playing field a little bit more.
Yeah, it'll certainly improve the the sort of smoothness and rapidity of being able to capture the telemetry information. But virtually everybody I talk to in the sort of IT operations and network operations management space have either now got open telemetry capability or are planning it, and are moving very rapidly to replacing some of their other sort of APIs and sort of SDKs in terms of, you know, making. So I see open telemetry becoming very much the standard by which, you know, telemetry data for operational purposes is captured. So I think, yeah, that's been a real positive. From my perspective, I mean, the whole term observability is still, you know, very broadly used. It, you know, I've just been doing a piece of work with Thousand Eyes, and they're sort of moving away from using the term observability because it's become so broadly used. Is that, you know, people don't understand anymore what it is. Oh, it came out of the DevOps arena, wasn't it? It was, you know, how do I get observability into my CI/CD pipelines, etc. And the irony is, it was originally a network management term. So open telemetry, I think, has made a big difference, and AI is making a big difference as well now, in the sense that, you know, pattern recognition, pattern matching, correlation of data coming through. Challenge, you know, being faced by people trying to deal with all that, though, is there's still that challenge of the data quality coming through in the first place. You know, there's basic telemetry, but, you know, things like CMDBs, you know, have not kept up with pace. So I think, you know, from an observability point of view, everybody's talking observability, and most people can, you know, can do it pretty well these days. But OTel will make a real difference to how quickly and easily you capture new and ingest new data.
Yeah, an anecdotal point on that is that in order for me to remember things, I've used the acronym MELT. So that's for metrics, events, logs, and traces. Now, me being not an expert on observability, I had no idea. There's actually, Paul pointed this out to me last time we had the conversation, that actually MELT is a standard acronym that's used in the observability space. I had no idea, but I used it just because I can't remember those 4 words: the metrics, events, logs, and traces. And even events wasn't part of it until somebody, a guest of mine actually, said, why don't you call the E, the lower E as I was using it at that point, and call it events? And I thought, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Little did I know that it's actually already being used in this space, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I've promised I will search it out to find.
Please do. I'd love to see that, because the reason why is because a guy called Omer Alti from LSEX, that's the London Stock Exchange Group. Shout out to you, Omer. Actually picked up on that idea and mentioned me in one of his posts, and he kind of extended the whole MELT thing into other areas as well. So I'll try and again drop the link to his LinkedIn post in the description of this video, because I think it was quite cool what he actually did. But he kind of, I think, was inspired by what I had kind of put it out as, which, like I said, I had no idea it was already a standard. Other people are using it. But there you go. I guess that kind of means someone's on the right track. That's the important.
I apologize for bursting your bubble.
No, not at all. I think what it does is actually validate what, you know, what I was thinking. So sometimes I think of these things and I go, oh yeah, whatever, and then, oh, actually somebody else has thought of it already, or somebody's doing that. Like the what was it, the acquisition of last year? I know, the year before, 2023, the acquisition of Isovalent by Cisco. I was having conversations with a guy that I know at Cisco months before that, and I was saying, you guys really need to look at Isovalent. They're doing some really cool stuff with eBPF. Maybe you should think of acquiring them. And then a few months later, they did. So I was like, yes.
Did you invest in any stocks of Isovalent?
Oh, I wish I had done that. No. But if I'm good at these predictions, and I have done them before, Nginx and F5 was the one before that, a couple of years prior to that, then there's still hope. Anyway, so let's move on to the next one, which was just very quickly on Cloud Repatriation. Now, I attended the Cloud Summit late last year. So again, there will be some content out for that. If you're watching this a bit later, it's probably out already. So look out for that on the Cloud Therapist channel. I don't have a lot to say about this in terms of projection. I think if we're going to double down on costs and things like that, we'll probably see a reduction and kind of steering away from so-called alleged repatriation stories and so on happening, and because of, I think, the way that sort of AI is being used and so on, I think we might actually even see AI kind of coming in to help with things like FinOps and stuff like that. Although, again, seemingly there seems to be a backlash on FinOps at the moment as well, and maybe there's a bit more of truth to that. There might be a little bit more of a ring of truth to that point. But clearly, just on repatriation, it's for me it's very simple. My point is very simple. Get your cloud migration strategy correct, and that's how you'll succeed in the cloud. Don't expect it to be just about cost savings and things like that. I think those myths, those are kind of urban myths. Those are kind of things that we've exploded a long time ago. But at the same time, like I said, I'm just not convinced with cloud repatriation. It may be happening, but show me the data.
And you and I have debated this to the nth degree, I think, and you've certainly changed my mind, to an extent. Not that I ever believed that anybody was repatriating systems developed for the cloud to on-premise monolithic applications.
Exactly.
That is completely, that's a complete myth. I mean, and let's nail that one now. Yeah. Repatriation is actually relocating probably due to costs, and maybe some concerns about getting locked into the big three hyperscalers. But
so
all I can say is various vendors will use repatriation as a marketing tool this year.
Yeah, but don't mention to me 37 Signals, Geico or Geeko, whichever it's called, and the Amazon Prime Video stories. If I hear one more journalist drop those out as examples, that's it for me. I'm gonna completely disbelief in cloud repatriation, for 2025 altogether.
So folks, a prediction is if by January 2026 we're still doing this, he's managed to avoid a journalist saying that, because otherwise his head will explode and we won't be doing this in 2026.
Absolutely. It's like 10 months or 9 months or something like that of potentially my head exploding in 2025. If anybody mentions 37 Signals, Geico, Geeko, whatever they're called, and the Amazon Prime Video stories. If you have some cloud repatriation stories, please let us know in the comments. That would be really interesting. So I'd rather get my teeth into those versus these three that get regurgitated by all the IT press all the time, which is extremely annoying, I think. Okay, so move on to the next one. Now, I had one around Supercloud. So there's a lot of kind of stuff. This has been touted along, for some time as a concept. It's never really kind of come to fruition, but there have been tools in that space that kind of maybe lend themselves, or at least kind of be the root of, potentially the root of, or part of a sort of a Supercloud sort of approach. So one of those more recent ones has been around WebAssembly, so WASM Cloud, and kind of being able to really doing for, I guess, WebAssembly what Kubernetes has been doing for containers. So this whole kind of space is going to grow, I think, a lot more this year. We're going to see a lot more standardization around WebAssembly. WASM is an orchestrator. WASM Cloud is an orchestrator for WebAssembly workloads. So it does pretty much the same job as Kubernetes, although you can run WebAssembly code and applications in Kubernetes as well. I feel that's kind of a retrofit. I don't think that's kind of necessarily the best idea. WASM Cloud is a lot more lighter and more geared towards sort of WebAssembly applications. But I'm going to my projection for WebAssembly in general is that we're going to see a lot more maturity of that, especially that the CNCF is now getting behind, some of those projects as well. The other one I wanted to mention in this space is Stack Guardian. So ability to do discovery, to develop, and to deploy on multiple clouds using one platform from Stack Guardian is another really good kind of approach. And that again lends itself to that kind of multi-cloud capability with something like these tools as kind of acting as the Supercloud approach. So that's really essentially the idea of having a sort of a Supercloud where you can essentially address multiple clouds all at once using one template, one approach to how to do things. And then the other one is, well, two more actually. Crossplane has been around for a long time, so this kind of really is more focused around Kubernetes workloads. So it's kind of taking care of Kubernetes clusters on multiple clouds. So that's by Upbound. And I think I've had the guy who is the sort of the DevRel, I think, for Upbound. He's been on the channel. I think we're going to be doing some more stuff with him in the future as well. But Crossplane kind of takes care of it from that sort of Kubernetes cluster point of view. And then an even more recent one called CRO, K-R-O, which stands for Kube Resource Orchestrator. I think this is a project that's been donated by the AWS, and it's really the use of the kind of the, it's using the term sort of orchestrator is interesting and intriguing, I think, in the name of the project. I think we'll probably see this kind of spread out, kind of beyond sort of the public cloud maybe capability, yeah, I don't know how that's kind of pan out. It's relatively new, but this is the kind of the absolute latest that I see in this sort of super cloud space.
I think we're all trying to move to this point of develop once, deploy anywhere, without having to re-engineer anything, play around with anything to make it work on the other platforms. I must admit I have problems with the term Supercloud because I don't think it is a Supercloud. I think it is a great set of tools that enable you multi-cloud from let's call it a single console. I mean, for want of a better word, I mean, literally. And that's only going to be good news for people who are concerned about getting locked into a particular cloud provider. I think if you can get that, develop once and run anywhere, will be a great way to go. Let's see how far it gets in 2025, but clearly indeed. I think we're going to hear a lot more about that.
Yeah, indeed. So I'll drop some stuff around all the stuff that we mentioned in that space. Okay, so let's move on to cloud security and networking. Now, I've got two things, I think, in this space that I wanted to say. So I think we're probably or hopefully going to see more tools built around the eBPF standard, the Linux kernel standard, eBPF, the Extended Berkeley Packet Filter standard. Some of them might be competing with the likes of Isovalent Cilium, which is already an established tool and doing fantastically well. As we said, Isovalent now part of the Cisco family. And then the other one is around what I've always termed to be cloud network management. Now, the likes of Aviatrix have been doing fantastic work, I think, in that space. Again, they just seem to be, almost a solo player in that. I know there's a couple other sort of vendors in that sort of space, but not to that kind of approach. That's that sort of cloud network management. And they do call it cloud networking. I think that's their term for it. I wish they would just stretch that a little bit more and call it cloud network management. I think that would be really cool, and maybe kind of make that sort of an industry standard term. But cloud networking, cloud network management, the likes of Aviatrix and some of the other players in that space, I think that's really a very underrated area.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've got much to add on that. I've been doing a lot of work with Thousand Eyes, and to an extent, they're getting into cloud network management. But I get the sense it's at a very different, they're coming at it from a very different direction than aviatrics. And maybe the two need to sort of pull together. I mean, Thousand Eyes is a monitoring environment. Aviatrics is a more of a sort of development environment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a more proactive, yeah, definitely.
Proactive. So I think, it'd be interesting to see that maybe those two sort of merging a bit more, because obviously, cloud networking itself it has been very difficult for most people to get their head around. Obviously it sort of disappears into into a cloud network, and they're dynamic. They're not, and cloud and networking has been so IP based in the past. It's actually very difficult to see what's going on in the cloud world. And you can get Cloud Watch and others will help you. But I think to get tools that can see right across the piece, but also it's how do you develop the paths, and how the things that aviatrics are doing, I think are sort of interesting. So it's an area to watch, I think, in 2025, because there are plenty of pressures coming on businesses in terms of, well, they're using more and more cloud resources, and things like DORA, the sort of resilience capabilities. People are going to have to get to grips with what's going on in cloud networks to meet some of those pressures. I think legislative and regulatory pressures, saying, guys, we rely so heavily on the cloud. If we don't understand what's going on in cloud networking, then we're at risk.
Yeah, indeed. On the security side, just again, cloud security, I think I'm hoping to see a lot more work around the policy as code sort of approach. Now, I in my sort of cloud migration chart, this is a stage 4 type of activity. You haven't seen that chart. I'll try and point you to a presentation or video where I have shown that chart. But Open Policy Agent, is one of those kind of standards in that space. I think it was developed by Styra, and it's a GitHub project, open source project. And there's other players in that space, but Styra is, I think, the lead in that. I'd like to see more of that kind of security, where the security is kind of really built into the code that you're developing. But like I said, it's very much a stage 4 type of activity. It's like somewhere out there with chaos engineering. So it's not something that everybody, I think, is going to be able to get to grips with. But policy as code, I'd love to see a little bit more of that. I've seen some movements on that, sort of in the last year. Maybe those will kind of expand a little bit more this year. I'm not sure, but we'll see how things go. But I'd like to see a little bit more around policy as code. Okay, open source software. That's a huge can of worms, I think. So I think what it's had over the last few months in 2024 is a shot in the arm, thanks to open source general AI, GenAI models. Early last year, I attended the State of Open conference early in 2025. It was Feb 2024, and all I heard about, and when it came to generative AI, GenAI models, and just AI in general, was a complete panic by the open source software communities. They didn't understand it. They didn't know how it worked. They didn't know, how it was architected. They didn't know how it was developed. People in that space are more about the infrastructure sort of projects of open source, not the kind of the data and analytics and so on type of projects in that space. And all the models were closed source, and some of them obviously continue to be up to now. So, and despite, I think, some of the ones that have been open source, there's kind of the choice of open source license that they've taken for those is quite dubious. A good example of that is the Meta Llama models, for example, and even the DeepSeek model is not kind of necessarily perfect for that. So I think they got a shot in the arm because a lot of stuff started kind of, at least generally, being labeled as open source. But I don't know, I just found that a little bit naive at that point, the beginning of 2024, and now I'm kind of seeing it as slightly pathetic in terms of the way that, they kind of, the open source software communities want to hog these models and make them all open because it, I don't know, keeps them more relevant, I guess. I'm not sure.
I mean, to me, the whole concept of open source data, is flies in the face of, of the reality of what data is. It's not stateless. It's very stateful. People own it. There's privacy issues, all those sort of things. You think, can you really make an open source AI data model? That's going to be an interesting challenge. I mean, I can feel the lawyers rubbing their hands with glee as we speak. So again, projections for 2025 is very much that, anything around AI and open source around data is going to be highly contentious, and I think we'll slow down. I just don't see that taking off, but maybe I'll be proved wrong. I really don't see that taking off. Certainly not in 2020. We've got so many questions around data to sort out, whether it's data quality, data privacy, data ownership, all the legal aspects. If you think you're going to get an open source AI, data model, forget it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, I don't know, I'm just kind of seeing that desperation. I mean, it was sheer desperation, over the course of 2024. Everybody jumped on the bandwagon of saying, oh, look, I can now run this GenAI model in Kubernetes and I've containerized it and is a project for, I was thinking, so what? Because, not everybody's going to adopt them to this. You can play with these things and that's fine, but not everybody's going to adopt them in that way. We've seen things like AWS's Bedrock environment coming in and allowing you to, forego all of that. You forget all of that kind of build stage and you take your time with, infrastructure as code and Kubernetes and kind of build the whole stack. Just choose a model and start using it, and you can API into that. Sure, you can write the script that APIs into, AWS Bedrock. I'd rather do that than kind of, build it all myself. And I appreciate kind of, there's a lot of kind of enthusiasts and whatever in that sort of open source space where they do want to do it all themselves and kind of, because it's all open source available on GitHub, whatever, you can kind of go and build it yourself. And that's fine, but that's not really enterprise. That's not really corporate. And we've, again, I've written on it and spoken about it extensively in terms of how enterprises are going to adopt AI. I still project that because last year was kind of the year of, proof of concepts and pilots and whatever. And I think I'm probably going to still continue with that, into this year. But my projection is that a lot of these enterprises are going to look at that and say, I don't want to do any of this open source stuff. I don't want to build it myself. I'm not a data scientist where I don't have any ML ops engineers and whatever. I just want to use AI. Where can I drop my data into an AI model and start querying the data immediately? What I would probably say is I can potentially say, and should be really a cool thing to do, is to front end some of the more traditional, and again, I spoke about this the other day, front end some of the more traditional databases, the RDBMS kind of type of databases, with an AI model, with a GenAI model that does the translation between my natural language query and an SQL query on the other end, and vice versa in terms of the output. I'd love to see that. Why isn't somebody doing that GenAI model? Yeah. I'd love to see that and put that in front of every SQL server, every Oracle database, and every DB2 instance. If somebody can do that, that'll be fantastic.
That would supercharge data mesh and data fabric, wouldn't it?
Exactly. And it would make, if you're talking about, federation and you're talking about socializing all of these, types of things, that would make access to those databases so much. They can carry on SQL querying as much as they like in the background. But for me, I'm querying them in natural language and I'm getting an output from them because there's a generative AI model sitting in front of them in natural language.
But also it would enable you to query multiple different sources and formats on the fly, effectively. I mean,
yeah. So I have
mesh and fabric anyway. Is that
exactly.
You don't recreate and create huge data lakes and data lake houses and God knows what.
Yeah.
You put this in between and it works.
Yeah, I don't need to ELT the data anymore and do all those kind of extra data pipeline, nonsense that you have to do to kind of get it through to the other side. So it's at least now visible, presentable, queryable, if that's a word, and so on. So I don't have to do that. Put an AI in front of it, let it do all the technical talking. I query the data, multiple sources, as you said, in natural language, because I'm talking to the GenAI model, and it gives me the answers back. And it could have got it from my data lake, it could have got it from my DB2 instance, could have got it from my SQL server instance, whatever. I don't care where it came from. And it's can, as you said, amalgamate all of those responses as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so again, like I said, I'm not really convinced with this whole. I think the open source software sort of communities and movements is going to continue to try and kind of hog the GenAI sort of models and insist that every single one of them has to be open sourced and the data has to be open sourced and so on. Good luck with that. I'm not really sure that's going to really happen. And we've seen, the top leader, the lead company in that space, OpenAI, hasn't got anything open source, although they have talked about it recently. Sam Altman was seen or had been interviewed recently, and he said, we're on the wrong side of history when it comes to open sourcing models. And yeah, they may open source some of the older ones. They're not going to kind of open source their golden goose kind of models. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to, I think we've done that one to death. Let's move on to cloud economics. So in terms of this, there was really a few things that I wanted to say. So first of all, there seems to be a bit of a backlash happening around FinOps. The so-called measurement that they use, the cloud units, are being perceived as being too broad. Some of the regular sort of IT pundits, like David Linthicum and others, have actually mentioned this and complained about this not being a true measure of how you kind of measure your cloud costs. I mean, for me, it's FinOps has always been a sort of a framework approach, and if you kind of query that through ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot and so on, you'll see that there is agreement, there's consensus that it's kind of a framework approach. So for me, it's, unless you have that capability and the bodies to throw at doing that, I think it's too bulky, to actually do that. For me, I'd rather go for the next layer down, which is cloud cost management or cloud cost control, as some people like to call it. And that for me equates to having a more focused approach to how you do, how do you kind of take care of your, and reduce your costs in the cloud. So, so things like KubeCost, for example, focuses on your Kubernetes clusters. It looks at all the Kubernetes clusters, all the resources you're using for those, and identify where you can make savings in those, in those clusters. And that obviously in turn turns into a cost saving in the cloud.
I mean, there's two different areas that I see that you need to focus on, and I agree with you. I think cloud cost as a particular area, but it's quite specific. You ought to be able to look at that and say, am I leaving instances running longer than I need to? Have I reserved too much, S3 or compute resource or whatever? Some fairly simple, straightforward things like that. But one of the things that bothers me about this, and letting the accountants loose on reducing the cost, is that you're not taking into account the benefits. And so there's very little, what are the outcomes that we're getting from this? If you think about, it's a lot easier to do more stuff in the cloud. You can run up things but nobody's going, yeah, but what were we doing with that? If you're doing sort of analytics in the cloud, getting all the data and running analytics programs and saying, hey, and suddenly you're able to, identify a new market, or just get a jump on your competitors. All those sort of things is not being talked about. And again, anecdotal evidence, and I think I've used this before, so apologies if I have. But going one particular roundtable I was on, a guy in a major European financial institution going, I've got the accountants all over me because we're spending far more money on analytics in the cloud than we did when we had it on premises. And he's going, yes, but all the things that we're now doing and the answers that we're getting out are not being, analyzed to say, actually, we've become more efficient, more effective, we're more competitive, or whatever. He said, none of that was going on. The accountants just looked at the fact that the bill was bigger. It was
and there's no, absolutely. I think none of these things measure the ROI. None of these things measure the ROI. And we've argued this from the cloud repatriation side as well, right? The other sort of side of that. Now, the only thing, so as we said, FinOps is one, kind of seems to be getting a bit of a backlash because it's kind of, cloud units are too generic. That's kind of the unit of measurement that they use. And, I've even heard that it's rather pompous and cumbersome, and I probably agree with that, actually. It's definitely a kind of a framework, and you need kind of the bodies to, and the resources to kind of throw at that. So the other point was, I disappointingly didn't see enough cloud cost management sort of movement and cloud cost control sort of movement in 2024. So I'm hoping that it largely remains stagnant, really. Like I said, apart from the likes of KubeCost and maybe a couple of others, but not a huge amount of that. The new category that seems to be emerging in this sort of cloud economics space is at an even deeper level, which is the profiling. And we've talked about that. I think we mentioned that a couple of times. So kind of cloud economics, then you got FinOps, then you got cloud cost management and control, and you've got profiling as kind of your third category. So this is kind of positioned that it's kind of a cutting edge thinking in terms of how it's actually doing things. And the idea with profiling is a very rudimentary thing. Again, I've done a talk on this from last year's conference, the Open Source Summit conference that will be coming out with a company called Polar Signals. So I will be doing that. Look out for that. If you're kind of watching this later, maybe it's already out on the channel, so look out for that. But their approach was saying, if we can optimize the way your application works in the cloud using profiling, that will have a indirect effect, if you like, on the amount of resources, CPU cycles, blah, 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 storage, and so on that you're using up in the cloud that you can now reduce. And if you can obviously reduce that, then it saves you costs in the cloud. So it's a kind of a not, directly targeted at sort of saving you costs, but because it's doing this thing about, optimizing and monitoring and optimizing, continuous, monitoring and optimizing of your application performance, it can now also potentially save you money, which is interesting, Paul, because you and I have talked about application performance monitoring, APM, from the likes of App Dynamics and Turbonomic and others, for years.
No, absolutely. And it's great to hear, because I think the focus is going to be this year on optimizing resources that are being used. But the challenge still is, and this is back to a little bit about the argument around the complexity of some of the sort of services or the broad span of services you can get from an AWS or an Azure gets quite complicated for people to understand. And people tend to take fairly simple decisions. Despite the fact that the cloud is supposed to be completely scalable up and down. The reality is you have to reserve instances, and and that's where an awful lot of the money is being wasted, probably, and again, simple operational management things that says switch the damn thing off when you're not using it. How do we get to
and as I said, that kind of, the more that you move into those, advanced stages of, of cloud, the more mature that you are in the cloud, then you can do that sort of thing where you can kind of switch off workloads, completely. So profiling, I think hopefully we might see a little bit more of it in 2025. That's kind of my projection really for this year. And we're kind of moving away, I think, maybe from those more cumbersome ways of doing things to the more, how can we get more results more quickly, basically, and save costs right now, and maybe do that on a continuous basis. So that's kind of, I think, where I see cloud cost management and profiling coming in. So the likes of Microsoft, have included this stuff in their cloud adoption framework, and AWS has a whole cloud economic center as well. So I'll drop in links in the description for that in the video. Okay. So I think that's all on what we want to say on cloud economics. Now, favorite topic of yours, cloud data management, storage, data analytics. That's the next category.
Yeah, I mean, data is front and center. AI, I think, has driven AI. Absolutely front and center of everything that we're seeing as analysts. People having to get to grips with that. I have a little bit of a problem with cloud data, I must admit. Partly we've described before. It's not really. It doesn't fit the cloud paradigm particularly well. But there was a report, and I'll send you the link to it, that came out that showed that they'd interviewed about 700 or 800 CIOs and chief data officers and the like, and a very large percentage of them were either already putting their cloud all their data into the cloud, i.e., or were planning to do so. And and I just think I'm not sure I understand why. Is it because we've talked about plenty of times, how siloed data is and how fragmented it is and what quality it's in. And I'm thinking simply lobbing your data into the cloud is not going to solve all those problems. It seems to be a lot of people who have struggled with, what you and I have talked about of that 4-stage model. How do I migrate to the cloud properly? They're all going, oh, we've got to do something in the cloud. Let's put the data in there. And you think, so I am seriously, concerned that if everybody throws stuff into the cloud, quite apart from some of the challenges around sovereignty and privacy, I'm not so worried about security because I'm not sure, it's particularly secure in on-premises environments. But so cloud, you hope cloud security would be better. But in a more general terms around sovereignty, privacy, but the fact that if you haven't cleaned it, you haven't really organized it properly, if you just throw it in the cloud, and it's a big bucket of S3 or whatever, that you're out there, that's probably going to cost you an awful lot of money as well. And I don't, and I don't know the economics of that, so I'm not going to make projections. What I am going to say is that, if that research report is replicated right across industry, then an awful lot of people are going to be throwing their data into the cloud. So a projection is cloud data, putting your data into the cloud almost as a first part of cloud migration is definitely a trend, and projections that will carry on. I just happen to think it's daft. So you heard it here.
Not mincing your words there, Paul.
All those very important CIOs haven't a clue what's going on when it comes to data. We haven't done the basics on data for you to be able to throw it into the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's stagnant when it comes to cloud data management. We've had a number of players in that space, and the Veeams of the world will kind of do more on the infrastructure side. Some of the other sort of players in that space, but it's not really.
It's a glorified disaster recovery process, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Well,
yeah. But it's not, I mean,
screw
it's
up
not.
the local ones, we can get hold of it from the cloud.
Yeah, and it's not really moved. It's
No,
not
I
really
haven't
moved
seen
a
it.
great deal forward.
And I think, I think the data industry, if you like, let's call it, in the IT data industry, is going to have a good year getting data ready,
Mm.
properly used by AI, by
I
stream.
agree with that. I agree with that. I think that's going to be one of the golden tickets for this year when it comes to data because like I said earlier, the enterprise are going to be getting off of those POCs and pilots, and they're
Yeah,
going to say, I don't want to do any of this. Just give me the data. What do I need to do to my data? I need to cleanse it and tag it. Right, let's do that then.
yeah,
And then upload it into a model, and that's it, into a SaaS model, and that's it.
yeah, and that will be a bigger project than they realize.
Oh yeah, and that's why
But
they need a third party to do it.
yeah, absolutely. So I think,
And that's where the third parties are going to go, ooh.
oh, absolutely. If you're into anything that's to do with,
Yeah.
orchestrating existing data, cleaning it, deduping it, all those
Yeah.
that
And tagging it. Yeah. So I think what we should do for the cloud, what's it called? The Big Data London
yeah,
conference for 2025, you and I should go around and only talk to those companies that are doing the cleansing and
yeah,
tagging. I think that would be interesting to see how much their business has kind of gone up. Yeah, certainly. I think the other point was around sort of sovereign clouds that you mentioned. Again, we might see a bit of a surge on that because as people start using AI, they might want to, even use it on their, on the more sensitive data, the regulated data, perhaps, or regulated, market sector they work in. So again, we might see a sort of a surge for, sovereign cloud usage because more companies, as we said, now want to bring that data into GenAI models.
But I think it's important that people understand that if you're using, never mind open source AI data models, the provenance of that data, where it's come from, who owns it, what's the sort of copyright around it. You can have a sovereign cloud where you've got it nicely stored in your, country-based, location, and you think it's not going to be a problem. And again, we just talked about the data companies rubbing their hands. Boy, are the lawyers going to be rubbing their hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, projections on cloud data, yeah, it's going to happen. But do we think it's sensible?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a real question, isn't it? And we'll see how kind of that progresses. I've just not seen a lot happen in the cloud data management space. Like I said, that other sort of more newer space where, data is being kind of prepped and cleansed and tagged and so on. I think we'll maybe see, my projection is there that we will see, we'll see a lot of that happening for this year, especially maybe kind of second half, as like I said, those companies are kind of finishing off their pilots and POCs and so on. So yeah, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. And like I said, sovereign cloud will probably maybe play a role in that. Certainly, I think when the AWS European sovereign cloud comes online, is going to be interesting. I think that's due for this year. So we'll see what happens. Okay, let's move on to computing. So you wanted to mention data center growth in this, I think, Paul.
Yeah, because and it's well publicized, and there's we can put up links to any number of projections about how many data centers are going to be built and what megawatts are going to be available. And so it's appeared on the BBC website this morning, just literally 10 minutes before I came on with you. So I'll dig it back out, and it's just an article. And it's actually about water usage.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've all focused pretty much on power, and Keir Starmer was talking up small modular reactors yesterday, because effectively the grid is going to run out of power. It's going to run out of power. So so again, back to what we were talking about earlier was, more effective use and more optimization of software development, more optimization of AI models will help. Yeah, but we're looking at, how do you deal with all the heat that's being generated? Because that's, you have to cool it, that's power, it uses water. So we're seeing things like liquid cooling coming in, but, with the latest Blackwells from NVIDIA, 1200 watts, a pop, put all those in a rack and you've got racks with a huge amount of heat being generated.
Yeah.
And there's anecdotal evidence, and it is only anecdotal at the moment. I've had, people claim that it's the truth, but we're waiting to see, is that, anybody who's turned on, the 72 processor Blackwell system has only been able to run it for an hour before even the cooling systems can't handle it, and they have to switch it off. Now that's anecdotal, so let's see what's going on. But if looking at the ability of liquid cooling to deal with that, I've not seen any statistics yet that says I can go beyond that I can cool above 1,000 watts using liquid cooling. And you can't do it with air because it's a gale force wind. Literally, it's a gale force wind in the data center if you want to try and do it. And in fact, I heard the other day that in certain AWS data centers, engineers in there are tethered to the floor. And you think, and they wear headphones, and they wear ear because of the noise.
Yeah.
And the wind flow to keep, these GPUs cool or whatever. Yeah. They literally, apparently, if you walk between two racks, it's not too bad. But the minute you step beyond the rack, and you get if you're not tethered properly to the various tether points, you get blown over.
They're gonna need magnetic boots or something next.
So I think it's a genuine concern from a sustainability point of view. And there's a lot going on, but we're not going to be suddenly saved by nuclear because it takes too long to to get things through. Even the SMRs will take years to bring online. And we might be talking 5 years, not 15 or 20 years that you get with a major one. And the grid itself is struggling to deal with the lack of consistency of renewables. So again, the grid was developed for something different. So I think, all the concern is that there's going to be, my projections there are that there will be a lot of small incremental changes and things to power and cooling, efficiency of software, all those sort of things, a whole series of that, and plus the use of liquid cooling, I think far more than we've seen today. It's certainly in new facility, if you're building a new data center, at some point you're going to say you cannot do air conditioning, you're going to have to do liquid cooling because and it's not, and that's actually reduces water. It's sort of slightly counterintuitive, but it's not using water. They're using dielectric fluids that are in a closed loop system. So, so both from a water and a heat point of view and a power usage point of view, you're going to see lots and lots of, so a lot of people will be making quite a lot of money trying to reduce the impact. And government might start to mandate what you put into data centers to cool them and power them in the future.
I think I can certainly see that happening on a regional level, on a federal level of some kind, right? I think the federal level, I think is kind of doing it a lot more, looking at the sort of the broader picture, but the kind of the regional level, there will probably be, depending on where they are, what the region is like, there'll probably be certain regulations there.
The other thing too was I think we're going to see, we get obsessed by NVIDIA and sort of GPUs and CPUs and and quite apart from Intel's problems, actually the one that almost sort of goes under the radar is the sort of chips with everything, the autonomous cars, for example. I mean, you're under the bonnet. There are hundreds of tiny processors in cars these days. they're moving data centers, So I think what you're going to, and in IoT and all those sort of developments, I think for the likes of Qualcomm and Foxconn and people like that, there's a whole other market going on there of low power chips going out, and I think that's just going to grow like topsy, absolutely topsy.
Well, we talked about I think we mentioned NPUs last time, and I said to you that's going to until it becomes system on a chip, until it becomes the SoC sort of architecture, it's just going to be another chip in your phones and tablets and what have you.
And so and again, we haven't mentioned the Donald, but some of the things that he's been getting involved in could make supply chains and the sort of global movement and production of these things a bit more of a challenge in the coming year. So on one hand, you've got tremendous potential volumes of these chips being required, and there's great opportunities for people. But on the other hand, some of the not only just sustainability of the materials they use, but from a sort of geopolitical point of view, which I don't want to make this a geopolitical session, but if you're making a projection, without those headwinds, then there's some really serious growth going on out there in areas that almost sort of go unremarked. We do get so focused on NVIDIA and GPUs that actually this is going on, and there's companies out there making a killing, if you like, and I think that will continue unless the real headwinds push in.
And I mean, some people have talked about sort of a competitor to NVIDIA, sort of a GPU. I think the AMDs and the Intels, and we've talked about Intel quite a lot, they're not up to it. They're not really those guys. There might be a startup that will come in for this year that will kind of do it more on the ARM type of processor, that kind of architecture, and kind of start from the very focus on SLMs, focus on the models that can kind of run on phones and tablets and
people are looking at very different architectures and different materials too. On glass. Interesting. There's lots of work going on as you say, at a startup level. I mean, the challenge for the United States, and their foundry, if they're putting all their hope on Intel for the foundry, God help them.
Yes, that's going to be really, that's going to be really tough.
But back the new Xeon launches, you think, what state are they in? So opportunity there for others maybe to come in, and we've talked about who would buy that to get the foundry capability.
I mean, Intel's I think just talking about Intel specifically in this space, because we're kind of in the CPU and compute space, I think Intel's going to get broken up. So the foundry side is going to get separated. I think they'll probably break up a lot of that. Now that Pat Gelsinger's kind of been retired or has retired.
But it's one of those, a bit like Boeing, it's almost too large to fail, so how the hell are they going to sort it out? As you say, breakup might be the best for it.
Okay, so yes, I mean, obviously the US policy has been, recently to kind of, I think they realize, you said, in terms of power and so on, energy requirements, they're not going to be able to do it with nuclear. It's just too far out. There's too much regulation, and you need to jump through lots of hoops and so on to make it happen, to kind of create a new, nuclear reactor and so on, even the SMRs. So I think, and then kind of the security headache around that, the location, environment, and social and things like that is going to be quite difficult.
I think SMRs, have a future. I saw a presentation the other, interestingly, it's still, they're 5 years out. They're not.
That's what I'm saying. So they're not for the Stargate project and things like that. Those are all going to be fossil fueled. I think, with the traditional sort of thing. And it's just like I said, the US policy's changed to drill baby drill, and then then I think that's going to be definitely the way that those GenAI hyperscale data centers are going to come online, and that's the only way to make them come online quicker. And because this whole GenAI space is a arms race right now, and we're seeing now that we've seen with DeepSeek that there is a potential for competition. I think India might be next. That might be a projection for this year. Something might come out of India for some one of these kind of cheap and cheerful sort of models, cost-effective models that will probably knock the socks off everybody else as well. Maybe done for like less than $1 or something. So that would be another, I think, one of my projections for this year. I think that will happen based on what we're seeing with DeepSeek and maybe some of the, going back to the drawing board by the by the Western sort of vendors that are in that space. Okay, I think that's all we can probably cover in this one, Paul. Did you have anything else on your list for compute and hardware? No?
Not without getting very nerdy and very techy and into.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll leave that then maybe to
I'm going to be focusing
topic
on in 2025, but
no. Okay. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. So the last one that we have is M&A, or mergers and acquisitions. Now, the HPE and Juniper networks, I think one is still outstanding. I think it was rejected by the US authorities recently, or was blocked by the US authorities recently. I don't know if that's like a sort of an Activision, Microsoft swallowing Activision sort of situation. So we'll see. They may have to do some concessions like Microsoft had to do, kind of sell off certain parts of Activision. But I guess, I mean, if you can, Microsoft are going to acquire Activision for $76 billion or whatever it was, and make that merger happen or that acquisition happen, then I don't really see eventually anything sort of stopping HPE from acquiring Juniper networks.
Yeah, I think like you, I think it will probably go through with some caveats, but some sort of slight restrictions on it.
Yeah,
I don't see. I mean, the challenge looking at projections for M&A is, I mean, M&A will continue because I think there is a model out there that a lot of people follow is getting startups through to certain stages.
Yeah.
Ready for some larger corporate to come and take them over.
Yeah.
Some of those work, some of them don't. And what they are, that will carry on going. But I don't see big mergers this year. They're difficult to engineer and to make work generally. There's some work, but they're costly and time consuming. And so looking forward, I'm not sort of my antenna aren't picking up. Oh goodness me! In this sector, there's going to be mergers between.
There isn't any obvious ones. Put it that way. The only one I might see is where the GPU business from Intel, because they're crap at it. So let's just admit that and give that to somebody else. So that might get acquired by NVIDIA, or maybe that, like I said, that sort of startup contender. Maybe, and they can maybe take it and drive it and make it a real competitor to NVIDIA. The problem I see for anybody coming into that sort of GPU space, which is kind of a point that I wanted to make in the previous topic, is that it's not just the GPUs and how great they are, but it's the ecosystem and the API development, that whole thing that's around them, that ecosystem. And NVIDIA's done a fantastic job with that. And they're just light years away, ahead of everybody else in that space. So, but I can see that part of the likes of Intel being floated, and then somebody like NVIDIA or somebody else picking that up potentially as well, just specifically as a kind of a acquisition in this category. The other one that we saw early last year, HashiCorp being acquired by IBM. I think there may well be one more of that open source HashiCorp size for this year that might get acquired. I don't know which one it is, and we may predict this or project this in future episodes of Cloud State of Play. I can't see it right now. There's probably a couple of names that I've got in mind, but I don't know. We'll see where those go over the next few, or at least up to the first half of this year. if certain things kind of play out as I'm expecting them to, then we might see that. But HashiCorp was the one from last year, and then I'm predicting kind of one more of that sort of HashiCorp size from that whole sort of open source, community open source software sort of space that may be coming up for acquisition again. Any other ones for you that you can think of?
No, I as you say, it's one that's left me sort of slightly cold at the moment. That says I can't really, there's nothing as obvious.
Yeah,
I don't think. I agree with you about Intel. It could get broken up into bits, and I suppose you could look at that. And there's so much uncertainty, I think, in the financial community generally around global trade and global, opportunities for 2025. That we'll get a clearer picture over the course of the next 2 or 3 months. But at the moment, you're going, I think everybody's sort of keeping their powder dry, waiting to see which way the world goes.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so I think that's the main ones that we wanted to do. Now, there was other people's predictions. So this is kind of from various sources that I've looked up. So I'll rattle through those extremely quickly. I'll include all of the stuff for this in the description of the video, so look out for it. So CIO Magazine had its own predictions for this year. It's like top 6 or whatever. It went everything from very strange, like AI enabling cloud, to AI integration with edge and cloud, to sustained growth for hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. I think we know that. I don't agree with the next one, serverless exponential growth. I don't think that's going to happen. And quantum computing use cases, again, that's still far away. I don't believe in that one either. And then they called something else. They had something called this was an edge computing demanding DevOps approach, a Dev Edge Ops, they call it. So, okay, good luck with that, CIO.
Good luck with that, yes.
Yeah. Okay, next one, top 40. I'm not going to go through all of these, from DBTA, which is the Database Trends and Apps website. They talked about green ops, cloud value optimization. Agree with that. The bolstering around outages, actually trying to avoid outages and mitigating those types of risks, like the CrowdStrike outage from last year. Scalability and agility, yeah. Hybrid clouds, yeah, heard that one. NewStack had an interesting one. So the NewStack website, which was minimal containers. So this was kind of a way of looking at the existing container sort of sizes and actually reducing hundreds of megabytes worth of useless libraries that actually get compiled as part of that process. So there is ways to actually do that. There's techniques to do that. Again, I'll drop details of the article. So that was kind of one of their predictions, which I thought was interesting. That's the kind of prediction. If you're going to do a prediction, let's have something like that. That's based on reality. People are working on it. So we go from kind of this research to this becoming a reality, for in the next sort of 12 months. So I like that, and it's kind of quite targeted. Now, Werner Vogels, the CTO of AWS, also had his 2025 predictions. I think these are so high level, I think it's quite difficult to really sort of pin down a lot of these. Multi-cloud was in there, neuromorphic computing, synthetic media. Well, we've already know kind of about synthetic data, extended reality, so XR, not AR, extended reality, although AR is in there as well. Rise of AR, rise of augmented reality, also in there. Smart cities, I think we've been there for decades. IBM was talking about smart cities in the late 90s. So, maturity of 5G networks. I thought we were already doing 5G because people are already talking about 6G by 2030. So, I don't know. Those are some of the ones I picked up on. There's lots more in there in his.
I think back to the 5G one, just as a sort of amusing closing.
Yeah.
That prediction, if at the end of the year I can say, actually, hand on heart, that I can pick up a 5G signal inside Stamford Bridge with 45,000 vans all trying to get to 5G at the same time, and it works, then hey, great, well done, nice, maturity of 5G.
Or as we did try to do in our live stream for the AWS reInvent in Vegas. Nobody could get on the Wi-Fi, and even when they tried to get on the 5G network, they couldn't do it. So I lost half of the guests that was supposed to appear from AWS on our live stream as well. So yeah, I don't know about that. Anyway, so that's again, I'll drop a description in the, or I'll drop a link in the description of the video for the Werner Vogel's predictions. And the last one is from Deloitte Tech Trends. Paul, you and I think might pick up on this as a separate topic, maybe in a future, near future episode, because these were quite interesting. AI everywhere, spatial computing, SLM adoption by enterprises, maybe, I don't know. And then what else was there? Computing hardware is eating the world. That seems to be their kind of this kind of come round, maybe kind of bolstered by sort of the GPU sort of thing. And then there was something called, one of the other trends was AI amplified IT. So this was around tech talent and a shift away from virtualization and obviously code jet. So I don't know, they've kind of hidden quite a few topics under that category. Not sure.
You want to dig under that one and say,
yeah, well, that's because maybe we should include this as a this Deloitte Tech Trends 2025 as a topic for one of our upcoming Cloud State of Play. Okay, so I think that's all the ones that we've got. I'm sure there's lots more. I'd love to hear kind of what your projections or predictions might be in the future as well. So if you're one of the regular audience for Cloud State of Play, as we said, we'd love to hear from you guys. Drop us some comments. Tell us what you think about some of the things that we've come through as well. Come to actually talk about through this episode. That will be really useful. Let us know what you think about some of these things as well. Paul, just wanted to say thank you so much again for all of your insights. Fantastic, projections for 2025. Can't wait to see how that's going to pan out for the year. And I'm sure we've forgotten about some completely easy ones and some utter howlers somewhere.
I think the audience has given us an easy ride so far. One of these years, they're going to come back and say, "You guys got it completely wrong."
You were wrong. Yeah. Maybe that might be a projection for 2025. That might happen this year. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. Either way, whether you agree or disagree, we love to hear from you. Okay, so again, as we said, all the links will be in the description of the video. Appreciate your time, Paul. It's been really cool to do this with you. I think that's it for this particular episode. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel.